Welcome to Choose Courage Inc., where we skip the boring intros and jump straight into reimagining business and workplace experiences with We Ain't Afraid to Go There conversations. And for this episode, we're going to be taking a little bit of a break from our mini in-between series, which talks about a lot of the spaces and experiences that people don't clap for when you're trying to build a life and a business for yourself. And instead, what I want to do is I want to revisit an earlier episode that we did in the year with Lauren Celenza on why we stay stuck and how do we break free. And I think just in light of everything that's happening in this world, in light of everything that's happening in the States, I think it's important for us to sit in another unfiltered conversation about how do we break free from what drains us and why staying stuck isn't the only option. I think it's an opportunity to talk about creativity versus capitalism and what happens when your work starts to feel like a cage. I'm having a lot of conversations these days with people who, in light of everything happening outside the 9-to-5 as well as within it, they just feel stuck and they feel like they can't express themselves in the ways that they want to. And so I want to revisit this conversation that I was having with Lauren because it's also one of our most popular episodes on the podcast. And I hope that it can be a moment of encouragement and hope to someone who's in need of it today. So with that, let's get into it. I'm really excited to chat with you about this idea of the comfort of discomfort. Why do we stay stuck and how do we break free? And so maybe a good place to start would be at this question of I'm just curious for you, what was the defining moment when you realized that the way we think, maybe the way you think about work and creativity had to change?
I think there were two defining moments in my life, one as a child, actually, and one as an adult.
Mm,
So as a kid, my dad was a manager of a warehouse. He worked in a lot of factories for a lot of American corporations throughout his career. He was working 14 to 16-hour days, third shift, night shift. My mom actually worked from home, which was one of the first jobs in the 90s that you could work from home, like a donation call center. So she was always on the phone asking for donations for veterans. And so I was always seeing her and observing her work.
mm,
And I mention the work of my parents because as a child, seeing, firsthand what my mom was doing, as well as the absence of my father always at work in the factory, I started to ask questions like, what is this thing called work? Why are adults working a lot? Why is it so repetitive? Why is it almost every day? When my dad is gone for 14 to 16 hours a day, where does he go? Why does it seem like the adults around me are so frustrated with work? And then as I became an adult, those questions evolved into, whoa, I understand it now. As I'm approaching the age of what my parents were, right? When I was asking these questions as a child, now I'm asking the questions of, wait a minute, what is our relationship to work? Who controls or shapes that relationship? What environmental or economic conditions are happening that are making it in such a way that is sort of giving us a relationship of frustration and tension and hardship, right? Why does it feel so repetitive? And even for someone like myself who entered the field of software design, UX design, that became really repetitive.
mm,
And I thought it had initially been creative. In some ways it is, but for the most part, it still sort of remains quite repetitive. And so as an adult, I was like, well, wait a minute, I don't feel like I'm connecting to creativity. I'm being hired to create, I'm being hired to innovate, but I'm in Figma files all day long. I'm staring at the same problem all day long. I'm talking about the same problem all day long. How is that creative? How does that allow me to innovate? And so it was those two moments of being a child and asking those questions, I think, that allowed me to open up my curiosity for asking those questions. And then as an adult, entering the workforce and realizing, oh, these questions remain and they're evolving. And now I'm really interfacing with them firsthand. Wow, this has to change. And so I think it was those two defining moments that really set that up for me.
yeah. And I guess what I hear too from those moments is in your childhood, it was coming from, I think, trying to understand what was happening and I feel like as an adult, we have those moments of thinking about how does work impact my relationship with my partner, my kids, whatever. But I feel like more and more, and especially these days, it's about the relationship that we have with ourselves. And why
Yes.
are we doing this? I think especially since the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, where people are like, "Wow, I'm really killing myself at work so that I can help my billionaire boss go to space again."
Yeah. This
Yeah.
is where we're at.
This is where we're at. Yeah, I don't know, but I kind of think about my experience. I think for me, there wasn't just one defining moment. It was probably more of a series of experiences that built on each other. But if I had to pinpoint maybe a major shift, it was when I started to realize that my work in the UX industry, as much as I loved it, was starting to feel like a cage rather than an expression of creativity and impact. I came from a background in counseling and human services and switched into UX. And just from the jump, I realized that I thought about what it meant to be human centered very differently. I always understood from the beginning, though, that UX was in service of business, of capitalism. I think what's been interesting as of late is to see how many UXers are just realizing that this role exists in service of capitalism and whatnot.
Hmm.
But I think once I started to the longer I've been in this industry, the more I started to feel like I was losing myself, which is interesting because this is design, this is creativity, this is all this, whatever hoopla. But if we're being honest with ourselves, and you kind of see it in some of the dialogue on LinkedIn, I think people are realizing that this industry takes and takes from you more than it gives.
Yeah.
And so for me, I've always been someone who pours everything into what I build, whether it's a company, a community, or create a project. But at some point, I noticed that this relentless push for growth, for proving myself, for making things work in a way that aligned with external expectations was draining me rather than fueling me. And sure, I was achieving on the outside. I looked very successful, but I didn't feel like I was thriving. And so really what I had to do was I had to start to redefine what success meant for me. Because I kind of think about work and creativity, you have to have that conversation with yourself of, okay, what is success? What does it mean to actually move forward? Not just in terms of revenue or impact or output, but in terms of sustainability and joy and alignment. So it also just meant embracing the fact that the way that I work and create isn't meant to fit neatly into conventional systems. And I've had to be okay with that. If you kind of look at my career right now, it looks a little weird. I was in counseling, now I'm in UX. I do a lot of consulting right now around organizational trauma. And then I'm building an astrology for pets app because why not?
Love it.
But I think it's, again, just about trusting your gut and just honoring what feels like and what is in alignment to you.
This is why I like the word relationship when we're talking about work and creativity, right? Because I
Mhm.
think for so long we've thought of work as this thing we do or go to for this amount of time. And, I think what we're hitting on is like, no, it's a relationship. It's a relationship with ourselves of what we want, what we value, what we want to contribute towards, what we
Mhm.
know to be good at, what we enjoy doing. And also the relationship to how much time do we want to spend? Who do we want to be working with? How do we want to have our creative output out in the world? All of that is a relationship. And I think when we start to think of it in that paradigm, then we start to realize there's more possibilities in that. Or we start to maybe make decisions about, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. So I have really appreciated that paradigm for myself because it's allowed me to navigate, tensions and make decisions and open up new opportunities for me.
I love, yeah, the point of relationship is interesting because it makes me curious about, I wonder if a potential block for people in reassessing their relationship with creativity, with work, is because in general, they have some habits around maintaining and sustaining poor relationships, just in general.
Yeah.
And so this is really tough because now you actually have to be honest with yourself. How are my relationships? Are they healthy? Am I falling into these circles and these rituals of codependency? Am I finding myself trying to prove and earn someone's love and affection? And how is that impacting the way that I show up in work then, and I'm trying to earn
Hmm.
approval and validation. So for me, I've always viewed UX, even entrepreneurship. I think these can be healing experiences if you allow it to be. If you're really about the
Absolutely.
work of being human centered, then you actually have to look into yourself first and be like, okay, what is off and not in alignment? What does it actually mean to be human centered in a healthy and holistic way?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why the
Yeah.
relationship paradigm is so, I think, liberating in a way when you think of
Yeah.
it that way.
Yeah. And I know we were talking about this earlier of really this journey is about it's a journey of tensions, right?
Yes.
And I'm wondering maybe how have you navigated the tension between staying safe in the familiar and also yearning for something more, something different?
Yeah, I love this question. And the answer is kind of always changing, right? Because it's because the tension's always changing. So let me first define what I think the tension is or what I've seen it to be in my own life and career. So there's a tension between staying safe in the familiar and yearning for something more or wanting to do something different. And often the staying safe part of this is usually what pays the bills, right? Maybe the thing that you want to do is more creative, more artistic, but it doesn't pay the bills in the same way that the staying safe does. And that's kind of the common theme that I have found to be true throughout my career. However, this tension is fascinating to me because if we spend too much time in the staying safe zone, and we do the thing that pays the bills, but we're not really exploring or nurturing, the things that maybe we're yearning for, resentment will flourish, right? I'm not
Mm,
fully expressing myself. I'm not applying the fullness of my skills and creativity. I feel a lack of agency, right? All of those things are very real feelings that can come to be if you don't sort of honor that voice or intuition that's within you wanting something different, right? However, if you spend too much time in the yearning for more zone, there's a risk that you'll lose sight of the practicality perhaps needed to transition to the next phase or balance these two things together, right? And I've
mhm.
sort of been in both areas where I wasn't nurturing the yearning for more and resentment grew, or I was going too far in the yearning for more and I lacked practicality and paying the bills. And that caused a lot of stress for me. So I would say I hope that we can live in a world where a couple things happen. One, where we release the shame that people can feel around this. A lot of times when you are in the staying safe or paying the bills, sometimes people can be judgmental or say that's boring or you're not pushing yourself. You know what I mean? And I don't think that's actually useful to say to someone, as well as if someone truly is exploring something really artistic and really new for them, people might say, well, you're not being practical. Well, that's not useful also. So I want us to release the shame of both of those and let sort of people figure out the best way that, they can navigate through it. The second thing I would say is what's been really useful as a mechanism is what I call the sunset sunrise analogy. So the sun, it's not just sunrise and then sunset in 1 second, right? There's a gradual transition every day on this planet between those two states. And that's sort of how I see a transition in a career, right? You may be in the staying safe zone, doing something that pays the bills, but you want to be doing something different that may eventually pay the bills, or maybe it will never pay the bills, but that's okay. You want to continue cultivating, right, that craft. This is where I use this analogy and I say, okay, how can I look at my weekly calendar and carve out time to spend and dedicate to each of these things so that I'm not feeling the resentment of not honoring the time to explore the yearning for more, but I'm not losing the practicality of what I need to do to pay the bills, right?
Mm,
And that has actually allowed me to transform into the next thing and the next thing. And to be honest with you, I kind of always feel like I'm in this sort of state of transformation because as soon as I maybe achieve the yearning for more place, then there's something else, right, that comes in. And I think this is actually a very entrepreneurial attitude
yeah.
where a lot of us who have that entrepreneurial spirit, we're always sort of like, we come up with one thing, then we, want to do something else. So it's okay. It's okay to live in that space and to honor that and to have something new come in. I think it's really about really managing your time wisely, also managing the people you tell about this transition to,
Yeah.
right? So that you have a trusted circle and you're not allowing too many opinions to sort of sway your decision. But, I think we're in a constant state of transition. The more we can release that shame
Hmm.
of being in that and honor both spaces for what they are, then I think we're more likely to, sort of achieve what we want to go after.
Yeah. I mean, when you're talking, I was kind of thinking about two things. So the last point you were making of just being aware of who you share those transitions with. I think there's some people who are listening to this who need to hear that not everyone will be a good steward of your vision.
Yeah.
We all have people in our lives where we're sharing an idea and yeah, but and they just are adding all the things that won't work, why it's going to be hard, what have you. And I think it's about getting really clear on who's in your corner. And there are seasons too where, like, hey, I'm building this one thing. This person could be in my corner for this season, but they can't for these other seasons, right? So you just have to, I think, have a level of discernment of who are those people and who's going to be a good steward of your vision, of
Mm-hmm.
your dream.
Mm-hmm.
And to that point, this idea of yearning for something more, I'm curious about your thoughts on this. I've seen this a little bit of, especially when I'm doing group coaching for entrepreneurs, there's always this moment in the cohort experience where people are like, oh, my dream, my idea is no longer a form of escapism. Now it's
That's powerful.
before I could kind of look at it and be, wow, that'd be nice, or what, one day, what if? And it was just an ability to escape, to dream, to kind of alleviate a little bit of what I'm experiencing. And now they're at this point where, oh, this is real. This is where I actually have to get practical, get disciplined,
Mm-hmm.
actually build something.
Mm-hmm.
Curious about just some of that and your thoughts around it.
So for a while, software design has been the thing that has paid bills, but I've really enjoyed cultivating my skills around writing and publishing and pitching to publications about what I'm seeing in the tech field or emerging technology or the workplace, as well as interviewing people that I've met across the world that I find really interesting who are, looking into how we can balance our relationship to technology or moderating festivals around this. And so all of those opportunities came from being really disciplined, actually, about that yearning for more space. So, yes, I knew that I wanted to write more. And so I started to kind of look at workshops and, classes and things like that, right, to learn about it. But I was also very disciplined about, okay, how can I expand my network? Or what goals do I want to achieve within this yearning for more space? Or seemed like a great opportunity. I'm going to go after it, even if it may not pay a lot, because I know it will help lead me to the next thing, right? Or expand that yearning for more space. And that really helped me cultivate the discipline for it. I don't think that the dream state has to be, there's a time and a place for the dream state to be really immersive and escapism, right? And allow us to imagine. But there's also a time and a place for it to transition into more of a disciplined practice. And that can lead to a lot of really interesting, I think, opportunities as well. And so, yeah, the yearning for more for me has always been fun and engaging, but also has really pushed my discipline because I almost have to be even more disciplined in the yearning for more space to kind of hold on to it. You know what I mean? And not let go of just because it's uncomfortable or unfamiliar. It would be easy for me to just stop doing it. Right. But because I want to do it and I gain a lot of perspective from it, and I know I'm contributing to the world in a different sort of way that have found to be really impactful, I have to I have to bring a certain level of discipline to it to maintain it, or else it would not be as maintained. I think that's especially important if you are someone who wants to do more artistic things that maybe don't hold the same economic value in
Hmm.
this society, right? So,
Yeah, and I think it's also an important reminder for folks to do not conflate hustle culture with discipline.
yes.
I think
Yes.
sometimes people, when they hear discipline, oh, that means I need to be working all the time, all these things. That just means you have an unhealthy understanding of discipline in your life. And that's okay to be candid with that because
Mhm.
there's room to grow. That's why there's a difference between growing old and growing. And so really this is an invitation to almost audit your relationship with discipline. What are the things in your life that you would say absolutely I'm disciplined around? And what are the things where you know what? There's room for improvement there. And so yeah, I I think to that earlier question of kind of like navigating that tension between staying safe in the familiar and yearning for something more. For me, there's a slow progression with this, but it kind of hit a moment last year. And really it was this progression of I knew I didn't want to be so heavily in the UX industry forever. Probably year 1, honestly, if I'm being candid, I knew that there's gonna be a clock to this just because of the way the industry is. This industry that prides itself on being human-centered, and it has honestly been probably one of the most frustrating, racist, just difficult experiences I've ever had. And so, I knew from the jump that my spirit can only be in this pocket for so long. And so I would maybe say a year or so ago, I started to go to these entrepreneurship conferences and events. And every time I went, I came back and I remember talking to my friend Bezad, and I was like, I never want to go to a UX conference ever again in my whole life. He was like, what makes you say that? When I'm at these entrepreneurship conferences and events, the entrepreneurs there, they don't know me, but they're so generous and sharing their ideas and helping me think through these different problems and connecting me to different resources and people. And they're so generous and open with it because they operate from this place of abundance, from knowing that there's plenty on the table for everyone else. And so the UX industry, the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
Lots of hoarding, prioritizing relevancy over maturity. Look at me, look at me. How can I create disciples essentially? An
Mhm.
audience that is really focusing on one, which is me.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of fear and scarcity, and it's just not, the energy's not there. And I was experiencing that more and more last year, and I'm like, yo, I need to shift publicly. Now, there's a little bit of a problem with that. One is that humanity centered is and had its start really servicing and supporting the UX folks, especially UX designers and researchers. At that point in my career, I was probably more well known in the UX space in terms of the things I talk about, whether that's trauma informed design or shame or what have you. And so I knew that the shift could potentially also impact my business even though we would still do these things, but it's that public perception, right?
Mhm.
Okay, I have a choice here. I can either take that risk of people seeing me walk back from UX and then business potentially being impacted, or I can still choose to do that, trust that things will work out, be clear on what's happening, be honest and clear about the fact that we still work with a lot of UX teams and organizations. That's still a big part of us. And just trust that it is worth choosing and protecting my spirit over anything else.
Mhm.
And it was a tough decision. I ended up publicly shifting away and announcing that sometime in the fall of last year. And being one of the more, I would say, known Black women in the UX space, there's also just, there's there's a few things people don't understand about my experience in the UX industry. One is because I talk a lot about trauma in design and, how to overcome shame and things like that, I get a lot of unsolicited messages about that.
Mhm.
I get a lot of trauma dumping and trauma stories, and it's a really hard thing to hold. And it's a
Yeah.
hard thing to hold too when you know that your community, especially the Black community within UX, in this industry that's so human centered, is experiencing so much racism and discrimination and bias.
Mhm.
And so I'm having a lot of those conversations with people in my community. And I knew that if I stepped away, that it would discourage some people, that some people would feel like I gave up on them and that it would hurt other folks. And it did. I was getting some messages and it was a really hard thing to hold. But, there's that choice, right? This tension of staying in the safe and familiar. I know I could continue to make good money. I know I could continue to go to these conferences and get paid to do this, whatever. Or in light of this short time that we have on this side of forever, why not pursue something that I actually care about and I'm curious about? And so now I'm shifting more into honestly using my UX skills and experiences into building this other business, Moonpause, this astrology for pets app. But I'm also still working with Humanity Centered and I'm learning a lot too from that org culture work and even the design work that we're doing.
Mhm.
I just don't care what people think about me. And I had to be okay with that and be able to walk away with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also you can say, I'm walking away from this before you actually do it. You know what I mean? Sometimes you have to take the steps. Sometimes that takes time to actually allow that to flourish and happen. But mentally, you can be like, I am already in the transition. And this is why it's
Mhm.
so important to protect who you tell about
Mhm.
this, because, to take something from an idea to reality can often take some time, right? Or just difficulty kind of figuring that out. And you don't want the wrong people to sway you in the wrong direction or kind of leave you off the track that you know to be true for yourself, right?
Yeah.
I
I
also
think
want to say something controversial here, which is I don't think UX was ever really human-centered. I think it
I
was
don't think that's controversial. I feel that tracks.
Yeah, I think it was marketed for a long time as human-centered, and now there's a lot of companies that are shedding that marketing layer and just showing it for what it is or what it always has been, which, to your point, has been a race toward capitalism and hoarding and all of that. So, I don't know. I would be shocked to sort of learn that anyone is really happy in UX right now if they want to do more human-centered work, because that's not the place that it's in or
Sure.
really has been in.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
just want to call that out, as that is sort of the reality that we are in. And, it's okay to feel a bit rattled by that, because it was a marketing tactic that was used for a long time that I think was pretty false.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and we won't go down that road. If folks wanna learn more about that, hop on the trash fire that is linked to
Yeah.
what's happening.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I will say though, for UX folks, even folks who aren't in UX, if you find yourself in a place in your career where like, this is no longer life-giving, this is no longer giving me a spark, this is no longer something that excites me, it's okay to yearn for and then pursue something more. And actually, there are probably people out there that don't even realize that they're waiting for you to show up so that they too can go out and bet on themselves.
Mhm.
When I publicly left, I was surprised at a number of UX leaders and other surprised at other folks in our industry who reached out to me who were like, yo, I'm planning my exit too. And this gave me courage and allowed me to see I can leave, that there is life after UX and that I can do
Yeah.
other things. So for some of y'all, I'm encouraging you to bet on yourself because there are people waiting for you to do so. They don't even realize that they're waiting, but if you do so, other people will also bet on themselves. So, well, I'll leave you with that thought to chew on. But I know, when it comes to this journey, it's not an easy one. It's
No.
difficult and it's littered with a lot of valleys and just kind of dark moments. I'm curious about, when did hope or creativity kind of help you through a difficult and dark time? What kind of changed because of it?
Yeah, I've talked about this before, but I think it's worth bringing up again. When I worked at Google as a designer for a few years, and I went in hard in that role. I was climbing the ladder, I was traveling the world. I learned a lot from it, but I don't even know if burnout is the right word of how I felt. It was beyond that at that
Mhm.
point. It was a loss of self. It was a lot of confusion, right? And so I took some time away from that world and started to dive into I applied for a writing workshop and got accepted. Writing workshops are actually really hard to get into, and I got accepted into one and I was really
Mm.
excited about it. And so I was cool. That's my ticket out. So I went into the workshop. I got to work with authors like Nadia Wosu, who wrote the memoir Aftershocks. She's brilliant. I got to work with T. Kira Madden, who wrote another memoir called Long Live the Tribe of Fatherless Girls. And so I just got to meet all these really interesting authors and writers. And that helped me through the difficult time because it allowed me to, when I was writing about my own experiences, I was getting feedback from other writers outside of UX, outside of tech, right? Like in different realms, right? And they were giving me feedback and saying,
Mm.
wow, we need to hear more of these kind of stories. Wow. Because there's so much about technology that is so like elusive, or we don't know what's really going on. It's not transparent. And, And to hear the story of someone who's trying to make sense of this industry that is not human-centered, that is really power-hungry, that is absolutely directly connected now, especially to the political climate and administration. We want to hear more stories of people trying to navigate through that or trying to change it. And that for me was okay. That everything changed at that point, because that allowed me to have a different relationship with myself.
Mm.
And I was no longer just Lauren UX designer. I was Lauren human being who who is exploring life and the timeline we live in through these different skill sets, whether it's design, whether it's writing, whether it's a little bit of entrepreneurship, whether it's moderating stuff. That is who I really am. Wow, cool. And so when I started to have and cultivate that relationship, everything changed for me. I was more open to opportunities. I was applying to more workshops. I was pitching to more, gigs and things like that. I was connecting to people I wouldn't have ever met if I hadn't held that space. So creativity for me, I guess, is, I think a lot of us see creativity as a product or an outcome from a process that we engage in. But I sort of see it as creativity is a thing that moves. It helped me get unstuck. I was feeling stuck at the train station, and creativity was the train that was, okay, we're going to take you from here to here. You don't know where you're going yet. It's unfamiliar. It's uncomfortable. Writing is no joke. It's really hard, actually, and can be really isolating, but it's a train that's going to move you to something else and something better. And that's how I define creativity, is that it has inertia. It helps me move out of the stuckness. And I hope that more of us can sort of see creativity in that way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, for certain folks who are listening to this who are in a difficult time or who know that they're about to head into a difficult time, there's an opportunity to ask, how can hope help me through this? Or how can creativity help me through this? And just an encouragement to get curious about what that might look like for you. And what does it like to be intentional with that versus the difficult time forcing you to fall back on that, right? I kind of think about, gosh, there's kind of like two moments that I think about, one with creativity, one with hope. With creativity, I think about the summer of 2023. 2023 was just like terrible year. And I think if folks continue to listen to this podcast, you'll probably hear me reference all the lessons and learnings from that year over and over again. But I was working through a lot of grief. I was working through a lot of loss, recovering financially from just the tech industry exploding in the beginning of that year and its impact on business. And I was just in a really dark space. And, for me, one of the things that came out of that was really just this desire to create something new, because what I was waddling through wasn't it.
Yeah.
And I was like, what would that just look like? How can I just have fun? How can I just build something that is fun and that's enjoyable, that's from a place of curiosity and joy? Because I'm lacking so much of that right now in my life. And actually, that's where Moonpause started to come into play, where, a lot of people know me for my experience as being a UX researcher, but actually, in the beginning of my career switch, I was looking at UX design and I was learning about these different design tools and designing stuff. And so being able to fall back on that again to build this product, to build this business, to take what I know of UX as well and to design this experience was so much fun. And creativity can be fun. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
folks, the reason why you're not having a lot of fun in your life is because you're not connected to what creativity looks like and means for you. Um, and so I think about that with creativity and with hope. I think about when I left corporate America to pursue entrepreneurship full time, March 1st of 2021. And the first week into it, I knew I had to restructure something different with humanity centered or it wasn't going to be a sustainable business. At the time, we were doing a bunch of live cohorts, and I just knew that something needed to change or I wasn't going to make it. This wasn't going to make it. But I really had to ground myself in really the vision of humanity centered, which is ultimately at the end of the day, it's how do we help people do the personal work to require to do their best professional work. But for me personally, it's how do I help people be and feel more free? And kind of start to operate from this place of I know that something dope is possible if I am committed to actually being people centered, purpose driven, I know something good can come from this. And it was really hope that pulled me out of this state of anxiety, of questioning, of doubting myself, so that I could start to be strategic and creative as well. And how am I going to reshape how I'm going to approach humanity centered? And just honestly, just giving me permission to view and relate to things differently.
Mhm. I love that question. How can I help other people feel and be more free? Yeah. And that's what I found to be true in my writing when I started my newsletter, Tech Without Losing Your Soul. I was realizing people were reading it and giving feedback and saying, oh, this just reading your experience helps me understand my own experience a little bit more. And
Hmm.
that can do a lot for helping people feel and be more free as well. And so that's so needed right now. So needed.
Hmm. Yeah. And there's a lot of things too in that journey that we have to unlearn and unlearn and then relearn again. Right. And so, I'm curious about maybe what fear or belief have you had to unlearn in order to step into your creativity and what courage looks like and feels for you?
I've had to unlearn a lot about trauma bonding. So let's get into this. Let's get into this. To level set, so I define trauma bonding in a few different ways. One is that it's an unhealthy and intense emotional attachment to the thing that is abusing you, right? So whether it's a workplace or an industry or a boss or a person, an administration of a country, right? It could be a lot of different things. And it's where we're collectively bonding to that attachment versus bonding with each other and bonding to the future that we want to see that's
Mm,
different from our reality. And so we see this in, group chats. We see this in conversations in person. We see this on social media, as you mentioned, LinkedIn and TikTok and Instagram, where I'm even seeing it with people that I've admired for a while, actually posting their opinions on kind of what's going on. And then people repost that, and then there's comments, but nothing's moving forward. It's just a lot of comments and noise. And the part of trauma bonding that I've had to unlearn is to take note of how much trauma bonding is around you and figure out a way to whether you're going to engage with that or not. Now, in some cases, I can see trauma bonding as an entry point into finding someone, a person, a community to help you feel a little less alone. So I kind of want to acknowledge that it has some merit. However, we can't stay there. We can't stay there. And it wasn't until I actually spent some time outside of the US and connected with people who were not doing conferences, but festivals. Not conferences, festivals, where they were bringing in a variety of creative people, musicians, artists, entrepreneurs, writers, whatever,
mhm,
to not just give a talk on a stage, but do a workshop, have a live band play some music, have some food, have some comfortable chairs, do some yoga, you know, make something. That variety helped me understand, oh, that doesn't have to be trauma bonding. It can be celebration, it can be joy, it can be, having conversations about how we get unstuck and shifting the conversation forward instead of just being in the stuckness, right, place. So how do we find joy in that? How do we do that? And I think that this is why I'm saying the word festival, because I think it really does depend on the structures that we build to cultivate less of a trauma bonding, situation and truly more of a celebration. And it's in those moments that we can find strength as well, right? Especially in this time. It's very hard to find joy. It's very hard to figure out how to bond to the future that we want to see. And we can't do that unless we're feeling some sort of hope. And joy can lead to the hope to get us to bonding to the future that we want to see, right? So I'm still unlearning that. I'll be honest, it's not easy. Like I said, trauma bonding is around us all the time, 24/7. And so I'm constantly trying to be aware of it and take note of it and then shifting whether I want to draw my attention to that or not. And then
mhm.
finding the spaces where, okay, I think there's more joy over here or more play to be had or humor or just levity that will allow me to bond to the future and bond with people versus bonding to the attachment of the
Ooh,
abuse that's going on. Yeah.
I love that. I love that clarity so much. The difference between bonding to the attachment that's causing you pain and harm versus bonding to people in healthy and holistic ways. And I think that's why I think one reason why it's so natural for a lot of folks to, I found myself in this as well before, to fall into trauma bonding is because that's a lot of our workplace relationships, right?
Mm,
You're
yeah.
like, we're in it together. We all hate this boss, this company, these whatever it is, capitalism. And you're just kind of close to that person, mainly because if you're aligned dislike of this one thing or this experience. Which is why I talk to a lot of people when they do leave their company, whether it's through layoff or it's of their own choice, there's a little bit of loss because they realize that the people that they thought they were close to, what actually held them together was pain.
Yeah. Devastating. That's devastating.
Yeah. And when you remove that pain and you're like, okay, what is left between us? Not a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love this shift towards festivals. I think it's what I appreciate about it is there's an intentionality when I think about festivals, intentionality in cultivating a space for wonder, curiosity, joy, connection. And I'm not talking about what conferences try to do in terms of connection of breakout groups.
Yeah. Yeah.
The hell? There's other more meaningful, deeper ways, fun ways, more human ways to foster that, to encourage that. For me, one of the biggest beliefs I had to unlearn is that my worth is tied to my output. That I have to constantly prove my value through doing, achieving, and producing. Part of it is just because of how I am in my upbringing, being raised by a mom who's half Korean immigrant and just if you have a Asian immigrant parent, you already know what I'm talking about, okay? So having that and a Black mom, you already know what happened. So part of it's just upbringing, part of it is just the fact of living in a world where I, as a Black woman, have to work twice as hard, 4 times as hard, 10 times as hard to get half the recognition at times, right? I had a manager who told me, "If you operate at the director level, and you're doing things that no other leaders in this org is doing, but I need you to do more associate level stuff before I promote you." What? So again, I had to kind of work through this idea and a recognition that I am so much more than what I can produce.
Mm.
And so for so long, I operated from that place of needing to be exceptional to be accepted, to over deliver, to be worthy of belonging. And that not only showed up in professional life, but also in personal. But creativity and courage, they don't thrive under pressure to perform.
No, nor do they thrive in trauma bonding.
Yeah, they need space, right? They need the freedom to be messy, to experiment, to fail without it being just key to my identity, right? So I've had to unlearn the belief that rest, especially, is a reward, but not a requirement. That ease means I'm not working hard enough. That if I slow down, everything will fall apart. And the truth is that things should fall apart, especially the
Mhm.
things that were never built to hold me. Some of you are holding on to things that you should have let go freaking years ago.
Yeah.
Let it go.
Yeah.
It's not meant for you. And
Yeah.
that's okay because more times than not, we're often trying to force our way through this door that's too small for us. There's other things out there. And so really stepping into my creativity and courage has meant trusting that I don't have to hustle for my work, right? That my ideas, my vision, my being, Vivian is enough. That I can actually create from this place of joy and not just urgency and scarcity. And that, the things that are truly mine will meet me where I am without me having to break myself or kill myself or betray myself to earn them.
Yeah, and I love that aspect of things have to fall apart in order for them to grow.
Mhm.
I mean, it's the garden analogy, right? You can't grow new seeds if your garden is full of weeds or dead plants. You gotta you gotta prune that stuff out to
Yeah.
plant new seeds. I mean, it's the same thing with life, with career, with relationships.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but it's also so important. That's why it's so important, I think, to know who your trusted inner circle is and lean towards more festivals, that kind of spaces, so that when you're going through that breakdown, because it's hard, it's not easy, you
Yeah.
can have the right support to get you through it.
Yeah, building on the garden metaphor, it's not just the right seeds and, oh, take out the weeds. It's the soil. Does the soil even have
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
nutrients
Yeah.
and the capacity to grow what you desire, what you deserve, and what you dream of? And so, to that end, for some folks, it's rethinking about your environment. It's rethinking about, yeah, maybe the goal isn't to go to 3 UX conferences this year. Maybe I'm gonna go explore different industries and different events that
Yes.
actually encourage creativity and joy and fun, because that's what the spirit needs, especially in these times, right?
Yes. And be open to exploring outside of the US too, if you can, and see what's
Yes.
going on.
My
Yeah.
gosh, free yourself.
Yeah.
Leave now. Yes. Yeah, I mean, and again, there's always this moment where people are like, okay, yes, dreams, hopes, desires, but bills.
Mhm.
But finances, how have you been able to balance that tension between needing financial stability and wanting to create in a way that aligns to your values and the life that you want to live?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, having a financial advisor has helped, right? And just having someone in my corner who can help me think through the numbers of these things. Again, I kind of see this is maybe a cliche thing to say, but I'm going to say it because it's important. Time is money. Money is time. I really do see these things as a symbiotic relationship. So, what I mean by that is when I am looking at my calendar for the week, I will be very disciplined, I guess, and ruthless about my time, and I'll color code the various things that I'm doing. So, how much time am I spending on this project versus that project, right? And so, am I making the time for the yearning for more space, right? And also balancing that. And so, I honestly offer that. I know that's, again, a cliche thing to say, but I actually think that the more we can actually be more disciplined with our time, we'll start to see the money follow that, right? So, that's
Yeah.
really helped me.
Can I just build on that for a second?
Yeah.
I feel discipline is the key to freedom, y'all. I've never met someone who's undisciplined in their life and they are healthy. Their bank account's fine. They're in good shape. They have healthy relationship. Discipline is actually the key to freedom. And so I love that you bring up that point of,
Oh,
because
yeah.
it's important to lock in.
Yeah, yeah. Yes. It's kind of wild how disciplined I am about it.
Mhm.
But it is the thing that has brought me freedom. It's the thing that has allowed me to open up more space. It's kind of wild that we still see discipline as like the antithesis of that when actually it can allow it to happen.
Yeah. I mean, it
Um,
reminds me of the quote from James Clear for folks who are also kind of thinking about, man, I really struggle with discipline. He says, we don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems.
mhm.
And so I think a lot of times we can over index on these individual kind of goals. But in reality, it's about, let me actually look at the context around what's happening and see what are the things that are either helping me be more disciplined towards this or the things that are not.
Mhm.
What are the things I can slowly start to change even, right? We're not proposing you do a complete, 180 overnight, but
Yeah.
be kind and gracious with yourself as you're building new ways of relating and working with yourself.
Yeah, and you can be disciplined and have grace for yourself at the same time too. I think that's especially important right now
Hmm.
because going back to I'd love to see a world where we release shame about some of this of like if someone truly needs some financial stability right now, which so many of us do, it is a really difficult time and it's difficult to have grace for ourselves through it. And it's okay to be like, this is a tough year. This is a tough moment that I'm in. This is what I need to do to create
Hmm.
that space for myself or maintain my mental peace or, so I just want to say that because, again, there's a lot of shame that can be attached to that element of it. And we can have discipline and grace at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that balance between that tension, right, of financial stability and wanting to create in a way that aligns to you and your values it's so tough. It's that The constant push and pull between financial stability and creative integrity is something that I feel, especially these days, I'm really wrestling through a lot, especially as someone I just refuse to build in ways that compromise my values. And don't get me
Mhm.
wrong, that's got me in trouble in corporate America
Mhm.
many
Mhm.
times. I've had to walk away from a lot of money in humanity centered because of that.
Yeah.
But it is something that's really important to me. So for me, when I'm kind of thinking about how do I deal with this tension, first, I really need to get clear on what does enough look like for me. Not just in a survival sense where I'm eating ramen every day, and I'm not hanging out with people, but in a thriving sense, right? What are my non-negotiables financially, in terms of my energy, and even ethically, right? And from there, I can start to reverse engineer how I think about my business, some of the different revenue streams, to ensure that I'm actually building something sustainable without sacrificing the heart of why I'm doing this work in the first place. Which is why I also think it's really important, especially if you are thinking about building a business or you do have a business, it's really important to lean into diversified income. If one revenue stream
Yeah.
starts to feel misaligned to the values and the vision and the purpose, I don't want to be so dependent on that then I feel trapped. Now I'm forcing to make compromises, right? So, good example is if my business only relied on B2B consulting with large companies and corporate clients, and now I'm in this moment where I'm like, do I want to take Meta's money if they want to work with us? Or would I ever work with McDonald's? Or would I ever work with Target in light of them rolling back their DEI initiatives? So, but if my business is only structured around those bigger companies and I'm feeling that pressure of my revenue opportunity drying up, I'm going to be put into a more compromising position. Well, and I'm just going to try and justify things, right? Even though I know within my spirit, this is out of alignment. But if I have multiple and different revenue streams in other ways, even other industries that I'm in, then I don't have to feel so trapped. So for me, I've structured my business in a way that gives me options. We have fired clients before. There are clients that we've added to our we're not going to work with you list, Meta, Target, McDonald's. There's a whole bunch of them, right? But I'm okay saying that publicly on record because I know that there's plenty else out there for me. So it's really important, I think, to get really clear on some of those things.
Yeah, I think even if you're not an entrepreneur, don't identify as an entrepreneur, diversifying your income, it offers a lot of resilience in this
Mhm.
timeline.
Mhm.
Um, and if you are finding yourself in a position where you're working for a company that doesn't align with your values, but it pays a lot, another tactic to here too is save. Save as much money as you can before you leave and be disciplined about that exit plan of this is how much money I'm going to save so that I can have maybe some space. The fact that we're even talking about this tension actually is a privilege in itself, right? Because I'm thinking back to my father, of he didn't have the opportunity to even think about how do I stay safe and yearn for more. That yearning for more wasn't even an option. It was how can I pay the bills to survive?
Mhm.
And he ended up going back to school and getting his master's degree, which was like a miracle given his work schedule, and he didn't sleep for like decades. And I'm not encouraging that, but I feel like the fact that as a generation we are evolving in that sense of like we're finding ways to have that diversified income, we're finding ways to have this tension, even though it's hard sometimes, is actually, I see it as a little bit of progress in a sense, and that there can be a lot of life and joy to be found in that tension. And when I'm feeling the weight and the frustration of being in that tension, that's what I kind of remind myself of is this tension is not also an opportunity. It's a privilege. It's something that as a generation, maybe this is the very question we're navigating. Generations after us will maybe figure it out a little bit more based on what we're learning, right? So it's all sort
Mhm.
of this human progression that there's an excitement and aliveness to it that if you can connect to it and tap into it, some days are easier than others, but if you can connect to it, it can actually help, I think, be a great motivator.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it makes me think about this story of when I lived in Philly and I was in the process of making my career switch into UX. I met this man named Mike. And Mike, if you're listening to this, I appreciate you. And I remember we were talking, Mike is a white guy, and I remember we were talking about this idea of privilege. And he's the first person that I heard talk about his white privilege in a way where he said, I don't want to waste my privilege.
Yes.
I don't want to waste it on selfish things. I want to be able to help other people. I want to be able to be intentional. I want to be able to change things. He's like, I'm always thinking, how do I not waste my privilege? And he's the first person I ever thought about that. He's the first person I've met who said that. And so I bring that up because when you said this tension is a privilege, it very much is.
Mm-hmm.
So don't waste it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't waste that
Don't
privilege
waste
of that
it.
tension.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The fact that I don't have to sacrifice decades of sleep like my dad did just because he wanted to get a degree, you know what I mean? That's a privilege in itself. And so don't waste it. And that's why I look at my calendar every week and I'm like, here we go. You know, I'm going to navigate this tension. It's going to be hard, but this is a privilege that I don't want to waste. Let's go.
Yeah. Alignment to your values is a long game. A lot of times when we talk about it, it's very short term, but it really is a long game, right? There's easier ways to make money. There's easier ways to kind of go about this, sure. But I know personally from experience that the cost of betraying my values isn't worth the short term financial gain. I've experienced that's just from my experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, so I keep coming back to this question of what is enough for me? And when you really sit down and do that math, I promise you what you're being paid at your company isn't actually like the ceiling. Because a lot of times in corporate America, enough is always moving. I'm going to make 100K, make 100K. All right, now I want to make 150K. Now I want to make 200K. Now I want this title and this title. And the carrot keeps moving farther and farther. The goalpost keeps changing. But if you're clear on what's enough, you know that if you're making a 300K a year and you're actually doing the math, in order to live the life that you enjoy and that's comfortable for you, you only need 150. Think about what you could do now with that extra money if you're disciplined. Now you can actually invest it in things that you care about, that you dream about, and that you yearn for. Yeah.
I love that.
Thanks for hanging out with us and diving into some of these real and unfiltered conversations. We know your time is valuable, and so we don't take it for granted. If today's episode made you think, if it challenged you, or gave you something new to consider, we'd love for you to hit that follow button on whatever streaming service you're using. That way, you'll never miss an episode when we drop them. And if you want to go even deeper, sign up for our newsletter at choosecourageinc.com, and you'll get updates on new episodes, access to exclusive freebies, and first dibs on coaching opportunities and other resources to help you make bold moves in your life and business. So we appreciate you, we see you, and we're rooting for you. Until next time, keep choosing courage over comfort, and a friendly reminder to drink some water.